present perspectives on innovation and entrepreneurship. We are privileged to have with us two accomplished gentlemen with much to contribute in this topic area, Ken Xie and David Cheriton, and he is joined by their discussion guide, Stewart Alsop. Ken, David, Stewart, welcome, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
This program marks the first collaboration between HISTA and Churchill Club. Our two nonprofit groups share a common bond. We both have a very deep commitment to encouraging innovation and economic growth, and our passion for that joined can only yield good things. So we believe that it is fitting to co-present events that educate and bring our communities together. And I especially want to give a nod to Jane Chen, who came to us with this program idea, and to Yabo Lin for connecting the dots between us. For more information about HISTA and the Churchill Club, visit hista.org and churchillclub.org. Let's thank Silicon Valley Bank and Chris Stedman for hosting our program tonight. Thank you. And one final note, if you are tweeting, you can find Twitter codes in your printed programs. And it's my pleasure now to welcome HISTA Vice President Ray Zhou, who will introduce our moderator.
Thank you, Ken. I would also like to thank Silicon Valley Bank for hosting this historic event. HISTA stands for Huayan Science and Technology Association. For the last decade, HISTA has been connecting investors with entrepreneurs and bridging Silicon Valley with China. It has become a leading Chinese-American professional association focusing on entrepreneurship. We are very happy to form partnership with Churchill Club, which is a well-known voice for innovation and economic development in the Silicon Valley. Now it's time to introduce our distinguished speaker, Stewart Alsop. Stewart is a venture capitalist, but before he became a venture capitalist, he was editor-in-chief for InfoWorld newspaper and also write columns for Fortune magazine. He's really a person who knows technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So it's not a surprise to me when he became a venture capitalist and he would invest in a company like TiVo at this very beginning. TiVo and its intellectual capital created by TiVo has transformed how consumers watching television today. So before, long time ago, when he was very young, Stewart actually, he's still very young. And he was an editor at Inc. magazine, a magazine focusing on entrepreneurship. So we're very happy today he can moderate the conversation. Let's welcome Stewart.
So it's kind of a funny thing. I thought I was the minor character here, and yet I'm the only one that's been introduced. I'm joined here by the main characters in this particular play, and it's my job to moderate or guide a discussion, as we heard earlier. And the last thing I am is moderate. So I'm going to see if we can have a conversation here that's interesting. The first thing I have to say is there are two billionaires on stage. Two. And I'm not one of them. So that indicates that these guys have been fairly successful at one thing or another. And I think in both cases, they've had a big role to play in founding multiple companies. Ken Xie is the CEO and founder of Fortinet, his third company, if I remember correctly. And David is the co-founder of, well, how many companies do you count as?
Founded.
Yeah, Granite,
Kealia, Arista Networks,
Arista.
and there's several more in the works. OptumSoft, HighCamp, there's a few others.
And then has had a heavy level of influence in the founding of other companies. So, well, we won't go down that path. Anyway, these are two guys that probably know something about entrepreneurship, also know something about innovation, and are both foreign-born. Am I right about that?
That's correct.
So here in Silicon Valley are two pretty interesting people to talk about the intersection of entrepreneurship and innovation. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So let me just lay out the ground rules. We're not going to talk about these guys' money, their families, or their political views. And I've still got to try to make it interesting. So what we are talking about is the intersection between innovation and entrepreneurship. We're going to be up here for 90 minutes. I get the first 60, and you guys get the next 30. So I'm going to do whatever I want to do the first 30, but when we turn the first 60, but when we turn it over to you, we're going to have a couple of people that will have microphones where you can ask questions. And I'm going to try to get you to ask as many questions as possible. And logically speaking, that leads to a conclusion, which is your questions need to be short, and they need to require short answers. That way we can get a lot of people into that last 30 minutes. So try to ask fast questions that require quick answers and stick to the topic. Are we understood? So, for example, here are two quick questions, one each. So, David, you and Andy, this is what I read. You and Andy wrote the first $200,000 checks for Google. And being a journalist, I've kind of wandered around trying to figure out who wrote the other checks. And I think Ron Conway wrote one of those checks. And I think Fred Giddens wrote one of those checks. Were there other, I think Ram Shram wrote one of those checks. Were there any others?
Well, let's see. The Ram Shriram was one of the other checks.
Okay.
And I was sworn to secrecy on the rest.
On the others, okay. Okay, well now I'll tell you that the other two were, anyway.
I usually say I'd tell you, then I'd have to kill you, but there's too many of you.
And that, by the way, is my line, because my partner used to work for the CIA, but that's a different topic. And so, Ken, just to demonstrate the essence of a short question with a really short answer is, why the hell didn't you make me do the Series A for Fortinet?
Probably not my problem is that I don't quite recognize your strong background or other things. Is really
That was good. That was very good. So when you guys start asking questions, you've got the model right here, which is don't answer the question at all. But so anyway, I'm an investor. I have been an investor for 15 years now. Prior to that, I was a journalist, as was described. And so I have spent the better part of my life trying to figure out this basic question, which is who are the kind of people that lead to creating successful companies? And what's the intersection with being innovative in that environment? In other words, what is the intersection between innovation and entrepreneurship? So what I've decided to do is to get you guys, to employ you guys to help me figure out the answer to that question. And that's what we're going to be spending the next hour or so trying to do. So first of all, I'm going to start with Ken in this particular question and ask both of you. Could you define innovation for me?
That's quite a big term. I think it's for me just try to do something maybe a little bit different.
Okay. Another great thing when you're asking a question is, when you answer a question is to redefine the question.
And also kind of more easy to do because I am in the network security space. It's lucky not in the semiconductor or some other space which need a lot of money, a lot of people, technology to do it. So that's where for me is really it's a network security. You can program something, whether firewall, block some attack, whatever. That's very easy. So that's where 20 years ago I tried to start in this one, try to make some money. Because for me, I come from China. My parents are professors. They don't make much money. So that's where I try to get something run something myself. So that's where the consulting starting get these things going.
So innovation is product of greed. No, a desire to make money. I mean, this is something that's debated and has been debated for years.
Yeah, later probably try to get more people involved, so I don't have to work that hard to make all the money myself. Right? So that's the way starting from the team, starting get things going. But I have to say the first one is really pretty unsuccessful. Kind of come from engineer background. We have no business training. Don't know how to deal with customer, don't know how to sell, don't know how to market, and also don't know how to deal with investor. So that's where the things we learned in the first few years. Eventually, probably make it more easy later. But
okay, David.
Well, I think innovation, I think, has been kind of an overused term in the business world, but I think, there's a simplistic definition, which is you do things in a new way. And this doesn't sound very impressive, especially if you're a biologist, where you realize that most mutations are harmful, but which is new things. I look at it that innovation is so valuable because the opposite is you do things in the same old way over and over again. And reminded of this program I saw about Neanderthals, where the anthropologists had concluded that Neanderthals lived the same way for 250,000 years. And, it's essentially, well, this club and this rock was good enough for my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, so it's good enough for me. And look what happened to them. I think the great thing about innovation is you get to do new things. And I would say, for me, innovation is wonderful just because the opposite is so boring.
You sound like a product of Silicon Valley. I know you come from Vancouver, but...
Yeah.
So David's talking about innovation representing change, something different, something new. And you talked about being motivated, in other words, to improve yourself, and that was sort of the essence of innovation. How much was new in the case of each of the three companies, Ken?
That's where my first company is kind of we do the software firewall.
Right.
There's quite a lot of company also do the similar things, software firewall. That's where we see not much difference on the product side. That's where kind of I think that's one of the reasons not so there's many other reasons. That's where in the second company, NetScreen, and also this third company, we try to do different than how the other people doing the security, pretty much all in the software. So we're thinking if we can do something different into the chip.
Right.
So that's probably different than the others. Because for us, really, like I said, we don't have advantage in the sales or marketing or whatever, some other culture background or all these things. So we try to do something different, which the other people not quite there yet. So that's probably can make us more easy to sell to the customer base.
So in the case of both NetScreen and Fortinet, what you're saying is that the innovation was you embedded the functionality from the software in the chip in order to gain performance and difference from other people.
Yes, exactly. That's where different than all the others. Because so far, it's pretty much most of the security companies still do in the software. So for us, if we can put the software into the chip, can make it faster, can make it more reliable. So that's the one we try to add additional difference beyond whatever the software function.
Right.
So that's make it relatively more easy to sell. But that's the difference we have. Function-wise, all the same.
Right.
Just we put in the chip, make it a little bit faster.
Right. So then, David, let me come back and say, so you're sitting on Andy's porch. This is what I read, that you were sitting on Andy Bechtolsheim's porch, and you both wrote a check for $100,000. I read that.
He was sitting on my porch.
On your porch, I
Yeah.
Well, he didn't have a porch at that time.
No, he doesn't have he has a Porsche. No.
So, to whatever degree you can, you're sitting there, and Larry and Sergey, I think they've already built the software, and I think it's already running. And,
Yeah, they're demoing it on the front porch.
So they're there.
Yeah.
So what was the innovation that you perceived at that moment in time? Just as a way of kind of getting at that question of innovation.
Well, I think just to put this in context, this was 1998, and you know the thing that. Do I have to keep this a short answer?
No, you can have long answers. You'll have to ask the questions that lead to short answers.
You know, I've had people say, well, how did you have this opportunity to invest in Google, and yet it wasn't obvious at the time. So, you know, for a few years after that, people thought it was silly to invest in Google.
Well, I'll put a finer point on it, because when I heard about the financing, unfortunately I was not offered it, so I don't have to admit that I didn't invest in Google. But when Kleiner and Sequoia both did the deal of $100 million post money for $12.5 million each, people were going, what? There's like all these search engines out there. Why are they doing Google? So that was the context at the time.
Yeah, so in 1998, I'd already had, one of my former students was a founder of Excite. That was one of the early search engines and much predating Google. And these things had wandered into the space that was known as internet portals at the time. And the conclusion was by the business people that you couldn't make money from search. You had to turn it into essentially an online newspaper. So there's sports and ads and all that sort of stuff, and news and human interest stuff and all that sort of thing. And then search was off to the corner, and it was, I think, compromised search, either not really invested in by a bunch of the companies at the time. So the common wisdom was search was not a business. Now, to me, search is an incredibly important function, and anybody who studied computing, you find that search is a big part of what you learn how to do, and if you actually understand what computers do, they spend a lot of time searching for things. And at that time, it was clear that the internet and the web was growing at an enormous rate, and it had gone from, and I've been involved in the internet since 1981 or 80, and so it was a time when I felt like I know most of the people on the internet.
There was an internet in 1981?
And so, yeah, it's kind of funny because it was, I think until the early 90s, it was not allowed to have any commercial activity on the internet. You have to feel like a dinosaur recounting how the Mesozoic era was. But so in that world, I'd seen things go from where I knew where to find things on the internet, since it was so small, to having trouble finding it and using Yahoo and so on, and having trouble finding things even though what was there was growing at an enormous rate. And so I was losing the ability to find information on the internet, and along comes Larry and Sergey with a solution that works extraordinarily well. And I like to tell people the first Google search I ever did was Canadian exchange rate, and it gave me more information than I ever imagined, and so I figured that it had to be serious. Yes, and it was also fast. And I think the combination of being good and fast and tackling something that's been a core problem you might view for computing and maybe for mankind, namely search for what you are after, just meant there had to be a lot of value there.
So you know now, of course, that search is the new target because Google is the new Excite. Anyway, so that's interesting. We've both come up with different answers to the question of define innovation, at least in the sense of embedding software in silicon, or defining a different approach.
Stewart, I think you also was the early investor of TiVo. That's really the technology I like a lot. That's really the father of a lot of other things happening today. So what was your
Can you ask him questions too?
He's good. Well, he didn't even ask permission. That would mean he's an entrepreneur. I think you're more like a professor, right? He's more like an entrepreneur.
I have an exam prepared for you at the end.
This is why it's fun to hang out on stage with billionaires. I don't necessarily play by the rules. So to answer your question, Ken, is we invested in the company before it was TiVo. We actually invested in the people. So that's a different area topic, and one that would be interesting in a different environment. So we'll see how I'm turning his question around. which is how do investors make the decision to invest, which is a really interesting question. And that's why I started out by asking, why didn't you make me do the investment in Fortinet? So, okay, second set of questions here. Second question for both of you is, define entrepreneurship. And I'll start with David, since you are one, and well, I don't know, I guess you are one too, but.
Boy, this is a harder one. I think the conventional definition is somebody who starts a new business enterprise and presumably carries it some distance. I think, to me, I have this more abstract notion of entrepreneur, which is that everybody should be an entrepreneur, that you have certain value you bring to the society, and you try and develop yourself to have, usually called marketable skills and so on, so that you bring value to the society. And the society, we live in a society which is very good at rewarding people for valuable skills. And so I think an entrepreneur is somebody who thinks in those terms of what value am I bringing, and am I bringing this in a way that should give me the rewards that I'm after. And I don't view this purely as financial rewards. I think some people work hard to develop their value to society so that they can be engaged in things that they enjoy doing, or they challenge to do, or they like doing, and so on. And I think that thinking needs to carry over to a company where there's a notion that you want to do something that's bigger than yourself, and it's beyond. I think this is sort of rather than being a personal entrepreneur, you need to be able to carry that notion of building value and having a way for society to recognize that value, which incorporates not just what you do, but with what a whole team of people is going to do. And I think it's that extension of yourself which makes a real entrepreneur, is to carry a group of people forward to bring that value to society.
So part of what you're saying, if I understand it correctly, is we all have a little bit of entrepreneur in us. Some go further with it, some go really far with it, and so entrepreneurship is kind of an elemental thing that has to be combined with other things to create a result.
Yeah, I guess I would only quibble. I don't think I would say everybody's an entrepreneur. I would say everybody should be an entrepreneur, at least a personal entrepreneur, but I'm sure we've all encountered people who view that I had this checklist of things, and now the world owes me a living, and I got a degree, from the right school, and I got good grades. Now you owe me a living, and there's been no thinking about, well, okay, somebody is going to have to figure out how to extract value.
You said we didn't want to talk about politics. I'm happy to go down that path. Look, you're talking about entitlement anyway, but that's all.
Well, I think, without getting into politics, I think there's entitlement thinking, and then there's earning thinking, and I think entrepreneurs think about, how do I earn the customer's business? How do I earn my job? All of those things. And to me, we should think, how do we earn our job? And then when you want to be a corporate entrepreneur, you say, how does this company earn this set of customers to make it viable?
So Ken, I'll ask the same question.
I think first I agree how David said. And then for me, I feel the entrepreneurship is really, or entrepreneur is a two-part. First, you probably need to build something or create something, whether the product or the service or anything you feel can be innovation or differences, I hope. So that's the first part. And the second part, you also need to sell it to the other or share with other or whatever, make it exchange some value, all these kind of things. For us, really come from engineer background, it's all trained quite well how to build some things. What we don't know actually much, that's we have to learn a lot. I think happy to go to the Stanford because they also is the school really teaching a lot of entrepreneurship. All the professors start their own company. Even the president of Stanford also has his own company before. So that's the part we learn how to get a second part, sell whatever you build to the others, to the community, whatever, and then hope make some money. So that's the two part need to be combined together. I think I kind of agree. Most people also have this both skill, and how to combine together, and also how to dedicate and focus, eventually make it larger and larger. So that's really the key, because a lot of people probably the things they build may not quite finished, or something like the selling part not scaled large enough. But if you can combine these two things and also make it dedicate last longer, eventually maybe people will call you entrepreneur. So.
It sounds like a rate or an honor to be called an entrepreneur. So I should know this about your background, but did you come here to start the first company, SRS, or did you come here and then discover the opportunity?
I come here really to study. That's where my parents try to, hey, maybe the ideal job will be a professor. And somehow, I'm not a good student anyway. So, but for me, it's interesting, really. We are in the right time, the right space with all the right people. That's where kind of the internet somehow is changing so much, and that's where I kind of get interested in this internet space and play around all these kind of things. Like I say, first try to do some consulting job, and then that makes some money. Or when you taste the good part of the money, then you say, okay, let's how to make a little bit more. So that's starting building the product, and then eventually try to form the company. So that's the part starting rolling and never stopped till today.
And you're still working on that?
I think that's the other part really. Once you start something, sometimes is when's the time to really to stop or whatever, really fully retire, all this kind of. For me right now, it's really there's so many people working together. It's a whole big team there, and we all try to build something different going forward. That's make you drag in here. Need to keep doing it.
Yeah.
So that's the part really stuck here.
So part of the reason I asked that question, and part of the context I was asking from, is I did work in Inc. magazine. It was the first kind of real job I had, and Inc. magazine was about starting companies, and it was founded in 1979. And when I worked there, I didn't have any idea about either technology or business. In fact, I didn't know much of anything, which has never stopped me. So I tried to understand entrepreneurship, and I discovered there were 4 professors of entrepreneurship in the country. So part of the context for being here now in 2012 and talking about this intersection between innovation and entrepreneurship is that 40 years ago, 35 years ago, entrepreneurship was not actually something people acknowledged as something you could do. It was, in fact, many people thought it was kind of a scummy thing to do, and most people that thought of as entrepreneurs probably sold you used cars and did other things like that. Now we celebrate entrepreneurship. We're sitting here talking about it, and that was part of the context I was looking for, is that we've developed now, and I'm mindful of what you were talking about, David, and wonder whether you've seen that sort of process happen around entrepreneurship. And
I'm sorry, I'm confused. What's the process of more
going over time? Yeah, that now we celebrate entrepreneurship, and now entrepreneurship. Is it really a new concept, do you think, or is it? I'm not sure what question I'm asking you, so you can make up any question to ask. Answer. Otherwise, I'll just move on to the next question.
Well, I think that I'd give 2 answers here. I think that there's the internet has created some, let me call them rock stars, that have gotten a tremendous amount of attention. So as, kids almost, that you'd say, here's some guy who's 26 years old who's a multi-billionaire. And we've seen this several times, and most of us say, well, Warren Buffett's got billions of dollars, but he's 86 years old, so there's not a lot of envy involved here, I think. But when somebody's 26 and they've got billions of dollars, so it gets a lot of attention there. So I think in that sense, I think entrepreneurship has gained a lot of visibility just because this phenomenon we've seen of people getting, spectacular financial success very early in their career. But the part that I think hasn't changed enough is that, for all these successes, that isn't the industry. There's a lot of small companies that make important contributions to even the big companies' success. And they're entrepreneurs that founded these companies, and in many cases, they're almost more my heroes than the people that are the successful ones, because if I can use my own dad as an example, he founded an engineering firm, and he had to use his own savings. There was no VC, he had no salary. He ended up borrowing, mortgaging his own house to pay the salaries of the draftsmen, and I feel like it was much easier for me than it was for him to start companies. And I think even now, my understanding of the statistics is most of the new job growth in the United States comes from small companies, and it's, there's a small number of Googles and Facebooks and so on. There's a large number of these others, and there's a whole bunch of unsung heroes there that we should really acknowledge are contributing a tremendous amount by the entrepreneurship they're doing.
So Ken, in part what David's saying is it's become easier. And it's partially that was the question I was asking. Has it become easier? So do you think it is easier if you move to here from China now in 2010? Would you have made SIS a more successful company? And trying to get at the idea that is it easier to start companies now and to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it is. I think that's where compared to 20 years ago when I started my first company, there's no this kind of association like whether Churchill or Hesta, we can go there, try to learn how to do the business, all these kinds of things. Compared to now, it's kind of activity happen pretty much every week, every day. So that's where starting company now is entrepreneurship, whatever, compared to before 20 years ago. We feel we are more socially connected, both on whatever get the business started and running, and also on the VC funding side, and even try to build a product. That's kind of a much more connected compared to like 20 years ago. Because when I tried to start 20 years ago myself, is the company really pretty much just a few friends try to work together, and we try to get some other people help give us some advice on how to like market a product, how to sell, how to get money there. Pretty much cannot find much there. And compared to now, I think is we do see a lot of company here also start is really from the very first day they connect the right investor. They have the team built out quite well, and also with all the right organization try to help them. So that's probably quite different than 20 years ago. That's I feel is can be more, if you have the right product, you can get a company grow much quicker, successful much quicker, and also kind of could be more competition because more people can easily start a company. But on the other side, you also can be more successful much quicker compared to before.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about location sensitivity for entrepreneurship. There's clearly a perception for ourselves being Americans, that we kind of rule the world of entrepreneurship and we rule the world of innovation, that the intersection between innovation and entrepreneurship happens right here in Silicon Valley, and there are instances of it in different parts of the U.S., and now there's beginning to be more and more instances. Just talk a little bit about how you feel, and I'll start with Ken because he came from there, but how you feel about innovation and entrepreneurship in China or in any other part of the world. You came from China, not the other part of the world, but
yes, also because all the communication, all the travel, whatever technology make the world much smaller, all kind of working together. For us, really, is a company has over 1,600 people. It's located quite globally. So we have like 400 people here. There's other 700 people in Vancouver. There's some other in China, in France, in India, in Japan, in Kealia. It's kind of the global location gave more advantage today, and also make it kind of, it's also deal with internet. You have to be, it's also more global there. So that's probably different than before, because both the product need to be involved globally, and also you also need to sell globally. So that's the other part, especially in the high tech, in the internet related space. So that's where from the very beginning, how to position globally, kind of probably will make it more easy to success. And also when we launched the product, it's almost 10 years ago, we also try to launch globally. Most U.S. companies really go U.S. first and then expanding beyond. So for us, we feel it's a quite successful experience really. We launch globally and then end up with each region, like U.S., Europe, Asia, each is about 1/3 of the business. So that's also kind of the global and the location, I feel is quite helpful.
So I'm going to follow that up, but first I'll ask you, so you come from Vancouver. I know that they're not the 51st state in Canada, but then, even if we think that. Sure. The Canadians are not famous for starting companies. Canada is not famous as a place for innovation. I'm just trying to stimulate a response here.
Well, I think there's a lot more innovation in Canada than is recognized in the United States. But I think that, and I think one of the things that I find dazzling in Silicon Valley is I've made the somewhat rude comment, a number of companies, that of who's our token American, because usually most of the people are foreign-born that are involved in anything I've been in, and it just happens that way. Mm-hmm. And, I think from a location standpoint, I think that there's kind of a unique set of circumstances that has drawn people in computing from all over the world here. And I think I would come at it from almost the opposite. Ken was focusing on the ability to be global, and that's all true. But to me, one of the most critical elements in building a company is to know what's happening, because when you start a company, you're not building for today, you're building for some version of tomorrow. And the most dangerous thing is to get blindsided by something along the way here. And I hate to cite Research in Motion, RIM, BlackBerry as an example of that, but I think the reality is that the computing community is still a village, and that the village is located here, and that when you're here, you can end up walking down University Avenue in Palo Alto and overhear somebody say something or run into somebody or other, and it's not going to be in the press for months, but this is something that you needed to hear. This is somebody you needed to run into. And I think it's that sort of little cauldron of things that are happening that gives you a sense of what's happening next that is so important, that allows companies, that draws people here, and also allows companies to be building for what's next as opposed to what's now or what was actually competing with yesterday, which isn't a great thing to do.
Yeah, so this is kind of what, thank you, that was excellent. You kind of set me up to come back to China and say, so now everything we've heard about China, the massive expansion in the economy there, and the sort of the expansion in the middle class, the number of entrepreneurs, the amount of business being done, would imply that at some level you should be concerned that Fortinet's primary competitor is being born in China now. You don't necessarily know who they are, but that's going to happen. Do you have any concern that, that kind of innovation will happen actually in China and come back this way?
It's really depend on the space, the area, the market. I think it's in all, especially internet space, that's still the most advanced technology. The innovation is all in here. So that's probably will be also have a huge advantage, keeping leading going forward, especially come from the great university, all the things. There's some other maybe some other technology like certain mobile phone or some other things. They probably has bigger market there. That's also a lot of innovation happening over there because they fit their market. So one thing about, because I also know quite some entrepreneur in China, is some of them really kind of only focus on their own market. They're not quite because they feel their own market is large enough. So that's probably whether the Baidu or whatever some other is really they only do within China. So that's probably at least not fit my philosophy. I want to think more global. So that's eventually will be the technology, all these kind of things. And that's where if you only limit to certain local, especially in the high tech, in the internet space, I feel eventually probably the more global you have more competition, and then from the competition you can build a better and better product. So that's I always need to have some competitor to do better. Otherwise, things will slow down a lot. So from that point of view, I would rather like a more global competition and make things better.
So since we're on the topic and without getting into politics, how much of both entrepreneurship and innovation is cultural? I mean, is it possible for China to produce innovative entrepreneurs? I'm trying not to be culturally biased about it, but for companies that are introducing genuinely new kinds of technologies or fundamental change to happen in China and to be born over there and come back the other way. Now, I know what you were saying just now about China is what everybody always said about America, that we always had our own market, that we could exist and we didn't have to move overseas in order to be successful. And that phenomena is true, but that used to be true of the U.S., so you could forecast that perhaps China will figure that out too.
I think in certain area, like China today, probably the biggest internet company they call Tencent. They do something they call QQ. That's the thing only happen in China. So that's the area I think in they're kind of you might innovate something kind of different because that fit their market well. But in the other majority area, they are still way behind all this Western world, all these kind of things. That's where they still need to, whether learning or whatever, all these kind of things. So I don't see much innovation. At least they starting to get closer to whatever the level here. That's probably will be some things can innovate starting coming. But before that, probably most of them still just try to learn what they did from here. But it's on the idea of innovation. I think most of the Chinese they like to try something. So that's where kind of compares to some other different culture background. Some of the culture background, sometimes people like to whatever just some other Asian country they just like to follow whatever be the whole group do the same thing. But in China, put it another way, sometimes. I come from Beijing in China, but in China sometimes they also say more like a small Europe because the people I have to say from Beijing, in Shanghai, in Guangzhou, in some other Western Sichuan, they have kind of different language, different food, different kind of cultural background. So that's the kind of a part mixing sometimes create some internal competition going on between different part of the China. So that's making some people like to always keeping trying to compete something or whatever. So that's the part kind of similar like some Europe has different country there. So from that point of view, the culture also I have to say is different. Different part of China has different culture, but I have to say it's still way behind what in the U.S. In a lot of technologies.
So I'm not going to come back and bang on you about Canada, but well, a little bit. We'll make this one quick answer. How much do you think the size of the country has to do? I mean, we're sitting here talking about the U.S., which is now 340 million people, or China, which I think is over 2 billion.
1.3 billion.
1.3? I thought it was closer to, anyway, well, lost track. I know India's over 1 billion, and those are the countries that people mention when they talk huge marketplaces, relatively wealthy or increasingly wealthy middle class, and, the infrastructure at universities and such like. Is Canada at a permanent disadvantage because it only has 25 million?
1/10 of US.
Yeah, 35 million. Then Australia's 20, and New Zealand's 4, and Israel is 4. And when you think about these countries that also have a fairly well-developed economy and well-educated population, but just don't have the population to support the founding of new companies. Is that a factor?
Well, I think it is a factor, but I think, if I can go back to your discussion, is it easier to start a company? As Ken was saying, making it easier to start a company isn't necessarily good. It's because the goal isn't just to start the company, it's to make it successful. And so you do find that there's a lot of companies in Canada that have been started by Canadian entrepreneurs that have been very successful. There's not many, or maybe there's not any, that have had the visibility of Google or Facebook and so on. So I think that I would view it more that if you're looking for these outlier sort of successes, that larger population, a larger sort of native market just gives you a higher probability that you're going to have a rock star that's going to hit the ball out of the park, so to speak. I guess that's a mixed metaphor. But again, I'm perhaps more on the side that if you start a company in Canada and you end up being a millionaire or multimillionaire, which, there's lots and lots of examples of this, including my own father, then you've been very successful by almost all standards, and you're a happy person and you feel like you've succeeded. And personally, I don't think that's sort of flippant to say, well, once you get beyond a few million, it doesn't make a big difference, but I think that's the reality. I think people I know that have been successful, the satisfaction comes from making a success, and the money is nice, but I think even Andy Bechtolsheim made this comment to me, and it's surprising how little money you actually need to live on, that once you pay off your mortgage and so on, and unless you're an extravagant person, it doesn't take much. So I think we should again recognize that lots of other countries have real successes there, and I think that in the same sense, if you look at the U.S. and you say, I think there's this small patch of ground that used to be fruit orchards that consumes 80 or 60 or to 80% of the venture capital in the United States. And so it's like an oasis in the middle of not quite a desert, but the U.S. is not a great example here in some ways as a country. The Silicon Valley is a spectacular example.
Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question, and what I want to do is, I have a list of people that I can enumerate here, but I want you to contribute to the list, and so I'll just name them off. And whoever's in charge of audio, I clearly have feedback going. Let me know if I'm doing something wrong. There. Now you can't hear me at all? No, that's great, excellent. So I'm just going to name them out, and it's going to be a little bit of a Rorschach test, but so you're entrepreneurs, and if I just call on, I can just roll them off the top of my head. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Fred Smith. You know who Fred Smith is? He founded FedEx. Howard Schultz, most people know. Add to that list, give me 3 people that you think belong in that I didn't already name.
I'd put Andy Bechtolsheim in that list.
Andy as an entrepreneur?
Yes.
You said give me 3.
By myself?
Yeah. And Ken's going to give me 3 too.
Oh my goodness.
It's a bit of a game, and I'm trying to figure out, what comes to mind when you think of great entrepreneurs.
Well, I think, tempted to say Len Bozak is one of the founders of Cisco. He didn't sort of carry
forward, yeah. Maybe
the company beyond being Can we say screwed over by VCs?
Sure. I took advantage of VCs and screwed them over, but unfortunately I wasn't one of them.
Yeah, they did better than we did. So, well, I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody obvious, but let's see who else. Let me name Diane Green as the founder of VMware. As another.
There's three. Okay, Ken.
I think it's more in this IT space is definitely Microsoft still Bill Gates. He built something and then he also put it.
But he already had named him. So
No. Let's come up with new ones. Put him on the spot. The thing I'm trying to get at is,
he wasn't a good student. He wasn't
a good student. He said that.
Michael Dell Computer.
Michael Dell, that is excellent.
Really, he perfected out the operation model.
Yeah.
That's also.
In fact, he never raised money from a venture capitalist either.
Yeah. So if we don't have to get money from venture capital, that's usually the best.
And Jim Clark, of course, is another good one.
True.
I'll steal that from you.
There you go. I didn't name Jim, that's true.
Yeah,
Silicon Graphics, Netscape, and Healthion. The thing I'm trying to get at is kind of what is it that leads to being, for an entrepreneur to be innovative. And, at some level, the way that we've been talking about innovation, it's almost impossible to be a really great entrepreneur without being technical, because we've been talking about technology being the domain of innovation. So I wonder, that'll be kind of my last question before I turn it over, but do you think it's a requirement to be a technical person to innovate?
I wish it was.
To be a great entrepreneur, I guess would be the right way to put it. But
well, I have this bias that I must admit, when you look at Larry and Sergey, and you look at Bill Gates and Andy Bechtolsheim and all these, a whole bunch of the people that we've named, Jim Clark, another great example, that they're all technical people. And I think that one of the things I think is exciting, and again, this is just really my bias here, is that well, obviously, all of these things we're concerned about are in high technology, and I think you need to have a good grip of the technology to figure out where you have a competitive advantage, where the technology is going, and how you're going to play this out. But I think there's another element at work, which is that in computing, we get trained about how to optimize information processing, and to me, a business is an information processing engine. And I think Google is a good example of a new type of company. It's, there's a number of those, but these companies are moving at a faster pace than we've ever seen companies move before. They're processing information in different ways, and this is being driven by this, in my bias, it's driven by this computational thinking, which has just accelerated everything. The famous data-driven approach to decision-making at Google isn't really because the data is pushing things along, it's because they understand how to use computers to process enormous amounts of information to have a better basis for making decisions faster. And I think that's accelerated the pace of businesses. And when you can move faster and move faster without tripping, that leads to success.
Mm-hmm.
I feel, like I said earlier, the entrepreneur is a two-part. The first part, you need to build something, and the second part, you need to sell it. So I think it's, for me, the engineering training is really first how to build something. That's where, if you really want to be more successful, really need to do something different. That's the innovation. So that's when we try to look in whatever company we see, you really need to build some strong technology product, try to build something different. But I have to say the other part also important. Sometimes the innovation in the how to sell it, the business model, is also kind of important. So that's you need to have both innovation in building the technology product, and also if you also can combine some of the other things advantage in the selling sense. That's the two things combined. They usually call the culture. That could be the innovation of the culture. So that's why whether you have something in the product or you have something in the business model, or Google I view is more kind of some kind of more innovation, open culture compared to some other model in some other different company, which more operation oriented. So that's this 2-3 part. Eventually, I think you need to have the innovation to be more successful than the other previous company, so you can become the leader, again, new leader of the space.
So I'm going to ask one more question, but we have 2 others with microphones on either side. We need to get their attention because they're the ones that are authorized to recognize somebody with a question. So before you do, I'm going to ask a really quick question. So we saw Google on your porch. There were all these search companies, and you were just talking about how Google moves faster, and it's not just a search company. I think you were saying that. Do you think it's possible that Google could be upended by a startup?
Well, I think it's possible. I think I view that actually my own bias with companies is that I think innovation is a little overrated, that in many cases it's all about execution, as they said in the French Revolution, and that, that if a company doesn't execute well, it leaves an opening for somebody to start siphoning off their market. So I think, to me, there's a threat at that level. I think, frankly, it would be hard to tackle Google front on as a better search engine, and I think, in the same sense that if, I hate to use the BlackBerry as an example here, but to tackle that front on as saying we're going to build a better wireless email for business people, that would have been hard to tackle. And I think that is sort of a two-edged sword, because in that example, the biggest threat to your business is not the people who are trying to do the same thing you're doing, it's somebody else who's operating on a left field that somehow you just don't have on your radar screen. Yeah. And I think that's where, again, coming back to my Silicon Valley village, that I could not survive in this business without overhearing conversations in Il Fornaio or walking down University Avenue or hanging out at Stanford, that sort of thing, because I'm just not smart enough to see where all the things are coming from, both the good and the bad.
Kanpai sushi, by the way, today.
So speaking of threats, Stewart's mentioned a few things, and we're taught by Andy Grove to always be paranoid about our own village here. And so which of the following do you consider to be more of a threat? Bad immigration policy, bad regulation in terms of Starbucks, or just bad VCs?
That was really good, though. That was a quick question. Can I have a quick answer, or can I have a long one, actually?
I think they're all pretty bad. So I think the bad VC you can avoid. The other two I'm not sure you can really avoid. It's really I see in the Silicon Valley is really you really need to keep all the best people come here, bring some new idea, and also working globally. So that's I see is quite important to be even. Company based on Silicon Valley eventually need to be more targeted global market, and also that's where the global market really need a lot of people from different area of the world to come over here to really build something to eventually market back to the market. So that, but is the VC part is I'm less worried about it, because there's also all kind of investor. And then also the best entrepreneur, you probably, if you can build something, no need to go to VC, that's always the best.
VCs are optional.
Well, yeah, I think, I hate to sound like Pollyanna, but those things you list, I think if those are their biggest problems, we should be getting up in the morning giving thanks, and I think we should be in any case, because, if you look at what other generations have had to deal with in terms of doing something different, starting new things, and so on. We live in a nirvana right now, and I think I must admit my experience with the venture capital community has been very, very positive. I mean, people have been very giving of their time. They've got a lot of experience, and they've been valuable people to talk to. They've been supportive and introducing me to contacts and other people I know, and working with students and funding internships. So I'm sure there's bad ones, but there's bad academics too. There's bad Canadians and so on. So it's just part of the mix. And I think bad immigration policy. I think it could be better, but I think what's to me, it's a longer term thing, because you see people making, people that are running companies around here are making business decisions where they're locating more and more things going on in other countries because of this. And so it doesn't impede what you're doing as a company, but I think when it impedes, the government basically is the one that's being punished, as well as the general population. And they got the government they elected that you say, well, there's a whole bunch of jobs that would have been here but are over there, and the company is still successful, the jobs are not here. And then with Sarbanes-Oxley, I think clearly the government's, it worked slowly. I think they overreacted, and now I think there's some moves to correct that, and it slowed down the pace of IPOs, but I think that's recovering. So again, I think we should say, thank God, if that's the top list of things we have to whine about, let's get the whining out of the way and go on to be successful, because our grandchildren will look back and say, why didn't you do this back then? Why didn't you take advantage of this golden opportunity? Because I think we're living in a golden era.
I have two questions. So first one is, what makes those successful entrepreneurs different from the other when they're still in the startups? What makes them standing out? Second one is a technical one. So, Ken, you were a Stanford master's degree student. Did you graduate? No, I haven't finished it yet, sorry. So, how do you get your visa problem solved?
What's the first question?
I think you got the second two, and David gets the first one. You know what it was? Okay. Did you graduate?
I take enough class, have enough credit. Later, almost 20 years later, they gave me the master.
Maybe what money can do.
So, but when I studied at Stanford, I did not finish. So, but I earned enough credit to be the master degree. But I already have a master back in China, so I really not quite want to just get a master that time. So I try to go to higher degree. Definitely not quite there. The visa is also kind of interesting. When I first come to, I think there's some other. When I first come to U.S., I was supposed to go to the East Coast to study. But one of my professor back in Tsinghua, he's a visa professor in Stanford. So he asked me to come here a few months early to help him. And that's where I end up. I say, well, maybe I can delay my study in the East Coast, which is cold, it's kind of far away. I would rather stay here. And then at that time, like 22, 23 years ago, is if you're working here for probably less than a year, you can get a green card. And for me, it's really, if I can get a green card first, because I have some skill, I already have some training, I don't have to kind of do some other things when I study, which I don't like, to earn some money. So that's where I say, maybe I should stay here for like 1 or 2 more years, and kind of, and also maybe just go to Stanford. So that's where, like you see, HP, we know each other like 20 years ago in Stanford campus. Really, we starting from the Entrepreneur Club. I think that time I was the one of a few which already have the green card, which can start a company, can work in. That's I view is kind of a lucky or kind of advantage, really, compared to most students come from China. They usually go to school first, and they usually after school they found a job, and then they get a green card, and then they start a company. So I kind of jumpstart this ahead of time. So when I studied at Stanford, I already have the green card, so I already can start something, I already can do the job. So that's make kind of a difference. That's make me, I feel kind of 10 to 20 years ahead of some other student come from mainland China. It's kind of a...
So you got your green card
before I got to Stanford.
just because they were looser and handing out green cards, or
That's 22, 23 years ago. It's a much easier.
right, much easier. Which I think is circling around to the question you were asking about immigration policy, which is having a bureaucrat deciding whether you're worthy of getting a green card may not be the right way to get Ken Xie to end up starting a company in the U.S.
So now probably take, I don't know, 5 to 7 years. But that time probably less than 1 year if you have the skill. So that makes things much more easier.
Yeah, good. Now, the first question was?
Well, so I think the question was what makes a entrepreneur successful, and
I think you were asking in particular, too, about in the starting of a company.
Yeah, what makes an entrepreneur standing out at the startup phase?
At the startup.
well, I think that to me, the person stands out for me personally is when they have a real passion for what they're doing, because I think one of the things that people don't often appreciate when you're looking from the outside, that a company is a lot of ups and downs and sometimes some major course corrections along the way, and so somebody who doesn't have that passion to carry it through and make it work is not somebody you want to back, because they aren't going to be successful. And then I think the tricky part is to say, well, okay, if they have the passion, do they have the sensibility that goes along with that to sort of relate to what are the problems in the market, not how beautiful their technology is, but can they see how this fits into the world? And then I think the third piece of this is that, to me, a successful company has got a whole large set of friends, if I can call it that, not in the Mark Zuckerberg sense, but in a successful company you find that there's all these people that are supporting it, whether they're the investors, the board, the employees, the customers, the partners it has. You have to have this ability to build up this whole friend network that makes this company successful. So you want somebody who has that sense that they can win friends and influence people.
I'd add one thing to that before I call on the next question, which is I heard somebody ask that question of Peter Thiel, who was a founder of PayPal and as well as a successful investor in many other things. And the way he answered it, he said, well, I thought about that a lot. I've been involved with a lot of startup companies, and the only pattern I've been able to determine that I can absolutely say for sure is that I've never met a founder who was successful who paid himself more than $100,000 when he was starting the company. And the reason he said that is actually, if you think about it, everything you just said is represented by that. If you're passionate and driven and really involved, you're not going to overpay yourself and use scarce cash to pay yourself as opposed to make the company successful. Next question.
So following up on what David was saying about bumping into people on University Avenue in Il Fornaio, we've had the opportunity to bump into you today, and Churchill Club does a very good thing on top 10 trends. It's usually done by VCs, but I'd like to ask all three panelists what you see as the next trends for entrepreneurs to jump onto in the next 5 years.
Okay, so just to shorten up the answer here, one each, because if we do 10 from all three of us, we'll be here for the next 3 hours. So one key opportunity for a new company in the next 5 years. 10's too far out. Ken?
I think it's probably the way we connect to each other today, whether by the mobile phone, by whatever, the internet. That's really can make him do something here will be more easy, more quickly successful because it's easy to scale quickly compared to before you have to approach one by one, try to make sales, all these kind of things. And also that's where the few internet company you can see successful much quickly. But I see also because the technology, whether on networking side, you can enable not only the early internet data traffic, but also the voice, the video, all these kind of things eventually can totally change, whether like how the video starting to deliver to the phone, to the mobile device. So this year I feel will be changing very quick and also have more opportunity to be more successful.
David?
Well, boy, you know, to me, every company is, I don't have a wealth of ideas, and every company is a real challenge to give birth to and shape to make viable. So I don't think I can say this is a great thing to do, but let me give you a slightly different view, which is that, you know, if you look at somewhat the history of computing the last 30 years, we've sort of moved up the stack, you know, in the sense of, you look at, you know, National Semiconductor and Intel as sort of this foundational pieces, and then we started building systems on top of that, and then software, basic operating systems. A lot of Sun Microsystems was, you know, bringing a different kind of operating system and different packaging of the hardware and so on, and you know, all the way up through all these various layers, and now we're up at this social level and so on. And so there's a tendency to look, well, what's next beyond social, in effect? But the reality is we built this whole sequence very rapidly, and you know, I think there's an opportunity to go back and say, gee, are we building, have we got lots of room for improvement in this infrastructure? And you know, I mentioned this, one of the things that inspired me in founding Arista Networks was I thought there was an opportunity and a, let me call it a societal need for a much higher quality of networking than we had, because it's the foundation for all of this stuff. When the network stops, everything stops. And we don't even really appreciate how dependent we are on that. Now, I think that in the same sense, you know, the world has been changing about the types of software we're writing, the types of computing that's going on, and yet if we dug up good old John von Neumann from the 1940s, he'd find the computers that we've got look very similar. Now, there's a recent research paper that was claiming that conventional processors running in-memory databases are running at 13% efficiency here. This is ridiculous, you know. So there's been no innovation on these fundamental things. You look at most of the software we developed is following models that are 30 years old at this point, and yet, you know, there was recent publication out of NSF or the National Institute for Standards, I forget who, about the top 25 program errors, and the first one was put in fancy terms, but it was the same one that was a big problem when I was a graduate student 35 years ago. So you think, what's changed? Well, we're making the same stupid mistakes, it's just what we're exposed to is dramatically bigger. So we don't have to go to whatever the next level is, mega friends or groups or blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of opportunities to build better infrastructure, and I think that's the important area.
What he said. And actually, that's what we're doing. We have a thesis called the Evernet, and that's what we're investing in, and we are going back to the infrastructure, and it's our belief that technology moves in cycles. The last major cycle started with the internet, the commercial internet, I should say, given what you said, in '95. And the cycles tend to run every 10 or 15 years, and that was now 16 years ago. So our current portfolio is built out of companies that are going back to the fundamentals. So we have a database company that can operate on billions of records in seconds. We have a network security company that can generate 1 million rules per packet and use those rules to defend itself. So we have companies like that in our portfolio. That's what we're betting on. So you have to get the lady's attention if you want to ask a question.
So maybe a follow-on to what you've just been discussing is innovation and entrepreneurship and the intersection with open source and sort of leveraging a huge community in those efforts. I'd just be interested in your comments on that.
So whether of you guys want to take on the open source question?
Well, this is a personal opinion, which is way off here, but I think the open source effort is a reaction and an overreaction to Microsoft. And, you know, if you look at it, Microsoft, at one point, the peak of their power, drove a whole bunch of the industry to conclude that the only way to compete with Microsoft was to give software away for free, and this included IBM in a lot of markets. And I think a lot of open source is really taking 25 or 30-year-old technology and making it available for free, and I think there's a real risk that we're undermining the next generation. As you know, when you find Richard Stallman is 55 years old, no longer wants to work on GCC, if you know what I'm talking about, who wants to pick up that baton and work for free to maintain 30-year-old software for a 35-year-old programming language and so on? I think that it's possible to undermine a market to have underinvestment, and I think that creates an opportunity, but I think we should look at that as being good from one angle, but it's also disturbing from the other, that it may be producing underinvestment in some areas.
I feel the open software community is really helping a lot of companies. They don't have to repeatedly do something that other people already did before. So that's like an example. Fortinet, really, we do leverage some open source. We also contribute back because otherwise we have to rewrite a lot of things, which that's I feel sometimes the closed system, whether early Microsoft or Apple recently is ready, that's probably will be not quite good for a lot of a new company. They want to start, they want to innovate, and also build on the foundation some other people already did a job. So because in order to innovate, you need to really have the knowledge or whatever build above some other people already did something there. That's the open source community is really contribute a lot, make it more easy for some startup company to build something different, innovate compared to whatever the other thing already have. So I hope the things will be moving forward, because that's really good for a lot of startup company in the Valley.
The twist I'd put on it is that I think the different model for selling software has a much bigger economic impact and opportunity impact, which is selling software as a service. It's a separate and not necessarily related phenomena to open software, but in parallel, developed at the same time. But the opportunity to sell software as a service is in the process of transforming information technology in enterprises and any kind of organization. And, you know, a lot of people don't even know it yet, but really change the way that everything is delivered, both to consumers and to businesses. And in terms of the economic impact and the opportunity, I think that's a much bigger deal.
Both of you are very successful entrepreneurs and also angel investors, and there must be zillions of people come to you to pitch their ideas. So from your experience, can you share some of your favorite pitch in the elevator pitch? You can share your least favorite as well if you want to. And also, who are the persons, the founders? Do they have to be your students, your friends, or someone you grew up with? Thank you.
Okay, so there are a lot of questions in that. You don't have to share your entire personal portfolio, first of all, so let's pick out one example for each of you. And I have to say, because I forgot to say it earlier, that I was invited to be up here on stage by a guy named Sam Lang, who started a company called Aloha Mobile, in which both of these gentlemen are investors. So pay attention to Aloha Mobile. That's one company in your portfolio, not Aloha Mobile, that kind of demonstrates there's multiple questions here. You know, do these people show up unannounced, or did you already know them? And kind of what's your sort of favorite profile for an angel investment besides Google?
Well, what's a good example here? One example, I guess, is a company called TinTree, which does I/O for virtualization and virtualized data centers, and this founded by a former student of mine, Kieran Hardy, and so that's one example of something where I have a small investment and I wasn't a founder, and I think just I've invested in things where people are not my students and not really my friends and not people I grew up with. I usually, like Larry and Sergey, I think I would say I invest with people where I wish they were my friends and wish they were my students and I wish I'd grown up with them. And I don't tend to invest with people where they're all negative answers on those questions. Because I think that, I think at the end of the day, there's a gut feeling that you have to have that we recognize we're in a people business as much as we're in a technology business. And now life is short. Nobody has any guarantees of how long they're here, and you don't have to be a billionaire to be very happy with your life, or that should be the case. I mean, even the average person in Silicon Valley has a better life than almost anybody else on the planet and anybody in the history of mankind. And so I think you want to have people that you want to work with, because when you invest, I think you want to work with them. You want to be part of that, and you want to feel like you contribute. And so you want people that you're happy to work with.
Yeah, I think for me, actually, if you invest company, I usually try to compare some experience I go through with. But on the other side, like David said, life's so short. There's so many opportunity, and we also need to find a way to shortcut some of the process. So that's why if someone you already know or someone you work with before or trust, they start something or their friends start something, that's a one way or shortcut to, instead of you have to do all this kind of talking due diligence yourself. The other kind of could be some other social proof, could be some other things you liking, similar together. So that's the way you can shortcut all this kind of things you have to do yourself in order to meet your standards. So that's the part sometimes we see more chance to invest in some company which have from all different kind of connection, starting know the people, all these kind of things. But on the other side, we do also looking for certain basic things. For me, it really also has to be more like a technology related. Like I said, really, they probably need to have something kind of a little bit different than some other things. And on the other side, really, the person try to see whether he can be, because start a company is really kind of a long commitment. It really has to be dedicated there for quite some time in order to successful. Like today, like a company average from startup to IPO take about 9 years. So that's really, it's a long-term commitment. See whether that person or the team will be get enough supporting to be long-term, to be doing whatever the things they try to do. So that's the few things. But I think it's you probably know more than we are.
I have opinions on everything. That doesn't necessarily mean I know more. But I actually want to ask a question which I've been struggling with recently, which is, if an entrepreneur has a family with young kids, do you think that's a reason not to invest in their company?
They probably need to get support, supporting